I never thought that a hidden cave, veiled by the dense foliage of Yellowstone, could hold such an unsettling secret. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor, and the familiar sounds of rustling leaves and distant birdsong enveloped me as I embarked on my usual rounds as a park ranger. But today felt different, charged with an energy that prickled the back of my neck. As I ventured deeper into the wilderness, the air grew still, almost suffocating. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting for something to unfold. My boots crunched over twigs and stones, and the scent of damp earth filled my nostrils, a reminder of the recent rain that had washed over the landscape. I paused, glancing around, feeling an inexplicable urge to explore further. That's when I noticed it, a narrow opening in the rock, partially concealed by overgrown vines and moss. Curiosity tugged at me, pulling me toward the cave like a moth to a flame. I hesitated for a moment, the instinct to turn back whispering in my ear, but the allure of the unknown was too tempting. With a deep breath, I pushed aside the foliage and stepped inside. The darkness enveloped me immediately, swallowing the faint light that dared enter. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the shadows, revealing jagged walls adorned with ancient drawings. Symbols and figures worn by time danced across the stone, their meanings lost to history. A chill slithered down my spine as I traced the contours of a particularly vivid figure, a creature that seemed to leer at me with hollow eyes. I stepped back, my heart racing. It wasn't just the drawings that unsettled me, it was the palpable sense of dread that hung in the air. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to escape the weight of this hidden place, yet a morbid fascination anchored me to the spot. What secrets lay buried within these walls? What stories had unfolded here long before I ever set foot in this park? The cave felt alive, pulsating with a history that resonated deep within me. The flickering light of my flashlight revealed more figures, more scenes of struggle and fear, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding upon something sacred, something that had been waiting for centuries to remain undisturbed. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the cave, a soft rustling, like whispers carried on the wind. I turned sharply, my pulse quickening. The darkness seemed to thicken around me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to flee, but my feet were rooted to the ground, paralyzed by a mix of fear and curiosity. What if I uncovered a truth that was never meant to be revealed? As I stood there, a cold sweat trickled down my back. I wanted to rationalize the sounds, to convince myself it was merely the wind playing tricks or an animal scurrying by. But deep down, I knew there was something more. The drawings, the whispers, the weight of the cave, they all spoke to a darkness that thrived in secrecy. I took a step back, my instincts urging me to retreat. The cave felt like a trap, an ancient predator waiting for the right moment to ensnare its prey. With each passing moment, the sensation of being watched intensified, as if the very walls were alive, judging my presence. I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam shaking as I turned to leave, the path out seeming to stretch farther away with every step. As I emerged from the cave into the blinding sunlight, the relief was palpable, yet the dread lingered, coiling tightly within me. I could hear the familiar sounds of the forest again, the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, but they felt different now, tainted by what I had just experienced. It was a stark reminder that some places were meant to remain untouched, some secrets too dark to unearth. Returning to my duties felt impossible. The thrill of exploration had given way to a heavy burden of dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was trapped within those walls, something that had been waiting for me to stumble upon it. And now, it felt as if I had opened a door that should have remained closed. It was a feeling I would carry with me, a haunting echo of that hidden cave. I resolved never to return. Yet the urge to understand what I had encountered clawed at my mind. Was I simply being paranoid, or had I truly uncovered something sinister? Those questions would linger, unanswered, taunting me with their mystery. As days turned into weeks, the memory of that cave lingered like a shadow over my daily routine as a park ranger. The vibrant greens of Yellowstone felt muted, as if a veil had descended over the beauty I once cherished. I found myself more withdrawn, my colleagues noticing the change in me. Among them was Sarah, a fellow ranger whose laughter used to echo through the trails, now dimmed by my silence. Sarah was everything I admired, passionate about the park, her enthusiasm infectious. Yet, beneath her bright exterior, lay a complexity I couldn't ignore. She often spoke of her childhood adventures in nature, recounting tales of exploring hidden nooks and crannies with her father. But there was a darkness in her eyes when she mentioned him, a fleeting shadow that hinted at a past marred by loss. It made me wonder if she, too, carried secrets that shaped her into the person she was. "Mark, are you okay?" she asked one afternoon, concern etching her features as we stood by the bubbling creek. Her voice was warm, but her eyes held a piercing intensity that made me feel exposed. I wanted to confide in her about the cave, to share the dread that haunted me, but something held me back. Would she see me as weak? Would she understand? "Just tired, I guess," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. In that moment, I was reminded of the contradictions we all carried, an outward facade that often hid the chaos beneath. It was a universal theme, the struggle to reconcile our public selves with the truths we kept buried. As I continued my rounds, my mind drifted back to the cave and the ancient drawings. What had those figures experienced? What fears had they faced? Perhaps their stories were not so different from mine. They too had been trapped in a moment of time, their existence marked by the shadows of their choices. The park itself was a tapestry of history, woven with threads of human experience. Each trail we walked was steeped in stories of Native American tribes who once roamed these lands, their legends echoing through the mountains. I often found solace in the knowledge that I was a steward of this vast wilderness. But now, the weight of the past felt like a burden. One evening, while sitting by the campfire with Sarah and a few other rangers, I found the courage to bring up the cave indirectly. "You ever feel like some places hold on to their secrets?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. Sarah looked thoughtful, her eyes dancing with the flickering flames. "Absolutely. There are stories in every rock and tree. Sometimes I think they're waiting for someone to listen." Her gaze flicked toward the darkening woods, a hint of wistfulness in her expression. It struck me then that Sarah was not just a colleague. She was a kindred spirit, someone who understood the weight of the past. Yet, there remained a barrier between us, my own fear of vulnerability. The thought of sharing my experience in the cave felt daunting. What if she dismissed it as mere imagination? What if it shattered the fragile connection we had? The days passed, and I became increasingly isolated. My colleagues tried to reach out, but I found myself retreating further into my thoughts. Memories of the cave intertwined with my daily life, haunting me like a specter. I often caught myself staring into the distance, the weight of the drawings and their implications pressing heavily on my mind. In one particularly restless night, I found myself wandering the park, seeking solace in the familiar surroundings. The moon hung low, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. The trees whispered secrets, and the shadows danced as if mocking my fears. It was then that I stumbled upon a local historian, an elderly man named Harold, who often shared tales of the park's past with visitors. "Mark," he called, his voice crackling like dry leaves. "You look troubled, my boy. What's on your mind?" I paused, considering whether to reveal my turmoil. "Just thinking about the history of this place," I replied, unsure of how to articulate the depths of my dread. Harold's eyes sparkled with understanding. "History can be a heavy weight, can't it? But it's also a teacher. We learn from the shadows of our past, and sometimes we must confront them to move forward." His words resonated deeply within me. Perhaps my own confrontation with the cave was not just a fear, but an opportunity for growth. Yet the thought of returning to that dark space felt like a betrayal of my instincts. What if the darkness within its walls was not just a relic of the past, but something that could reach out and ensnare me? As the weeks wore on, I became increasingly aware of the impact of my choices. The tension between Sarah and me lingered, an unspoken understanding hanging in the air. She was perceptive, and I could see her concern deepening as I withdrew. One evening, she confronted me. "You can't keep shutting everyone out, Mark. We're here for each other. Let us help." Her plea struck a chord within me, but the fear of exposing my vulnerability paralyzed me. Would revealing my experience in the cave change everything? Would she see me as more than just a ranger, but as a man grappling with his demons? In the days that followed, I found myself wrestling with my own contradictions. I was a protector of the park, yet I felt terrified of its depths. I was a guide for visitors, yet I felt lost in my own journey. The universal themes of fear, loss, and the search for understanding intertwined within my life, shaping my choices and my relationships. As I walked the trails, I began to notice the beauty in the imperfections of the world around me. Each tree bore scars from storms endured. Each rock held stories of time's passage. Perhaps it was time to embrace my own scars, to confront the darkness within me rather than flee from it. The days that followed my unsettling discovery in the cave were marked by a growing sense of unease. Each night I lay awake, haunted by whispers that seemed to echo from the shadows of my mind. The fear I had felt when I first stumbled upon the ancient drawings morphed into a moral dilemma, a gnawing question that refused to leave me. Should I return to the cave and uncover the truth, or should I leave the past buried where it belonged? As a park ranger, I was trained to protect the land and its secrets, yet here I was, wrestling with my own fears. The thrill of exploration had always driven me, but now that very impulse felt like a curse. I often found myself staring at the entrance of the cave during my patrols, the darkness within it beckoning me like a siren's call. The choice was excruciating. Every time I hesitated, I felt like I was betraying not only myself, but the very essence of who I was. One crisp morning, while reviewing maps at the ranger station, Sarah approached me. She had sensed my withdrawal and had made it her mission to draw me out. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, her tone firm yet gentle. "About what?" I replied, feigning disinterest as I traced the lines of the map with my finger. "About the cave," she said, her gaze unwavering. "You can't keep this to yourself? It's not just a personal struggle. It's part of our responsibility to the park." Her words pierced through my defenses. I wanted to confide in her, to share the weight of my thoughts, but the fear of losing her respect held me back. "It's nothing, really, just a curiosity that's eating you alive," she interrupted, frustration evident in her voice. "You have to confront it. You're not alone in this." The thought of returning to the cave filled me with dread, yet there was an undeniable pull. I knew I needed to face whatever lay within. The moral implications of my choices gnawed at me. If I buried my fears, would I be abandoning the truth? I found myself at a crossroads, oscillating between the desire for closure and the instinct for self-preservation. That evening, I decided to return to the cave, not just for myself, but for Sarah and the truth that had been haunting me. As I approached the entrance, the air thickened, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient. The shadows loomed larger, and I hesitated, heart pounding against my ribs. With a shaky breath, I stepped inside, the darkness swallowing me whole. The beam of my flashlight danced over the drawings, and I felt a palpable tension in the air. As I moved deeper, the whispers grew louder, intertwining with my thoughts, urging me to uncover the secrets hidden within the stone. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the cave, sending a wave of panic coursing through me. My heart raced as I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was Harold, the historian I had met weeks earlier. His face was pale, and his eyes held a wild, frantic energy. "Mark, you shouldn't be here," he shouted, his voice trembling. "You don't understand what you're dealing with." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, confusion and fear colliding within me. "This cave, it's cursed. Those drawings are more than just art. They're warnings." He stepped closer, urgency radiating from him. "You must leave before it's too late." The weight of his words hung in the air, and I felt my resolve falter. "Cursed? How can you say that?" I challenged, disbelief coloring my tone. "It's true. I've studied this place for decades. Those who disturb it face consequences. Dark, unexplainable. Consequences." His eyes bore into mine, urging me to understand the gravity of the situation. A chill crept down my spine as the implications of his words sank in. The conflict within me intensified, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Did I really want to uncover the truth if it meant risking my sanity? Or worse? Yet, just as I began to consider leaving, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement in the shadows. My breath hitched, and I turned to face the darkness. The whispers escalated, swirling around me like a tempest, and I felt an overwhelming pressure, as if the cave itself was alive, pressing against my mind. "Mark, we need to go," Harold urged, panic rising in his voice. But I was rooted to the spot, my curiosity piqued by the unknown. "No, I have to see it," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. The desire to understand outweighed my fear. Just then, a revelation struck me. What if the cave was not just a repository of history, but a living entity that thrived on fear and dread? What if it was waiting for someone to unleash its true power? I felt the weight of the choice hanging heavily on me. Would I be the one to confront it, or would I succumb to its darkness? As if sensing my hesitation, the cave trembled, and the walls seemed to pulse with an energy that was both terrifying and intoxicating. I could hear the whispers more clearly now, forming words that sent chills down my spine. "Leave before it's too late." The warning resonated within me, and in that moment of clarity, I realized I was at a critical juncture. I could either turn away and abandon my pursuit of truth, or I could embrace the chaos and confront whatever lay ahead. I looked at Harold, who was clearly terrified. "I have to do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to understand what this place wants from me." "Mark, please," he pleaded, desperation lacing his tone. "Sometimes ignorance is bliss. You don't have to bear this burden." But the seed of determination had been planted. I had come too far to turn back. As I pressed on, the cave closed in around us, shadows looming larger, revealing layers of history I had yet to comprehend. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I stumbled, barely catching myself against the wall. A hidden passage opened, up, revealing a deeper chamber filled with more intricate drawings, their meanings layered in complexity. My heart raced as I stepped inside, the air thick with anticipation. "Mark!" Harold shouted, but I couldn't turn back now. The urge to uncover the truth was overwhelming, pushing me forward despite the consequences. I knew that whatever lay ahead would change everything. As I ventured deeper into the cave, the intricate drawings on the walls began to tell stories of their own, weaving a tapestry of the past that resonated with my present. Each figure seemed to pulse with emotion, capturing moments of fear, struggle, and survival. I felt a strange connection to them, as if their experiences mirrored my own internal battles. In the midst of my exploration, a memory surfaced, my mother's voice, soft yet firm, echoing in my mind. "Monsters aren't always what they seem, Mark. Sometimes the real monsters hide in the shadows of our minds." Her words had always haunted me. They were a reminder of the fears I had carried since childhood. I recalled the late-night stories she would tell, tales of creatures lurking in the dark, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting victims. I had dismissed those stories as mere childhood fears, but standing in the cave, surrounded by the echoes of the past, I realized she was right. The true monsters were the fears we refused to confront, the darkness within us that we often tried to bury. The cave was not just a physical space, it was a representation of the emotional labyrinth we all navigated, a stark reminder that avoiding our demons only gave them more power. As I continued to study the drawings, I heard Harold's voice echoing through the chamber. "Mark, we need to leave. This place isn't safe for us." His fear was palpable, and I could see the sweat glistening on his brow. Yet I felt compelled to push forward, to delve deeper into the secrets of this place. In the back of my mind, I sensed the pressure of time bearing down on us. I knew I couldn't linger here forever. What if the cave decided to keep us as its next victims? With each passing moment, the shadows seemed to grow darker, and I could feel the air thickening. With tension, "Harold, wait!" I called out, my voice echoing against the stone walls. "What do you know about these drawings? They feel important." He hesitated, glancing at the walls as if they might reveal their secrets. "They tell of a great darkness that once consumed this land. Those who ignored the warnings faced dire consequences. You must understand, Mark, some things are best left buried." His words struck a chord deep within me. The weight of his warning pressed against my chest. I thought of Sarah and the bond we had formed over our shared love for the park. Would she understand my need to confront this darkness? Would she see me as a coward for not facing it? Suddenly, I remembered a conversation we had shared about the history of the park. Sarah had mentioned local legends of spirits that roamed the woods, guardians of nature who would protect the land from those who sought to exploit it. I had dismissed those tales as folklore, but now they felt more tangible, as if the spirits were urging me to heed the warnings. "Harold, what if we're meant to confront this?" I pressed, the determination in my voice surprising even me. "What if the only way to break the cycle is to face whatever is trapped here?" He shook, his head, desperation flickering in his eyes. "You're playing with forces you don't understand. Sometimes the act of confronting something can unleash it." The idea of unleashing a darkness terrified me, but the fear of ignorance was equally daunting. I thought of my brother, who had struggled with addiction, a battle that had consumed him. I had watched helplessly as he fought his demons, and in those moments I realized the importance of confronting our fears head on. "Harold, we can't just walk away," I said, my voice steady. "We owe it to ourselves to find out the truth. We can't let fear dictate our actions." Just then, the cave seemed to react to my declaration. The ground trembled slightly, and the drawings glowed faintly, pulsating with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. The tension in the air thickened, and I realized we were running out of time. Whatever force resided here was responding to our presence, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Mark, we need to hurry," Harold urged, but I felt a newfound resolve. I had to understand what this place wanted from us. It was not just about the cave. It was about facing my own fears and the shadows that had haunted me for too long. As I moved further into the chamber, I noticed a series of symbols that seemed to depict a ritual, a gathering of figures encircling a dark entity. The illustrations were vivid, capturing the essence of both fear and resilience. It dawned on me that this wasn't merely a warning, it was a plea for understanding, a call to confront the darkness rather than succumb to it. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the drawings. "It's a ritual of protection, a way to confront the darkness. What if we need to do something similar to break the cycle?" Harold's eyes widened with realization. "You might be right, but we have to. Be careful. If we're going to try this, we need to do it right." Time was slipping away, and I felt the urgency of our situation pressing down on us. I thought of Sarah again, of how she would always remind me that facing our fears was the only way to grow. I couldn't let her or myself down. "Let's gather what we need," I said decisively. "We'll find a way to harness the energy here and confront whatever is trapped in this cave. We can't let fear win." As we began to piece together the elements of the ritual depicted in the drawings, I felt a sense of unity forming between us. The act of preparing for this confrontation brought us closer, and I realized that Harold, despite his fears, was becoming an ally in this journey. Together, we were forging a bond that transcended our pasts, a shared purpose driven by the need to confront the unknown. Just as we finished gathering the necessary items, a low rumble echoed through the cave, causing the ground to shake beneath us. I felt a surge of adrenaline as the shadows deepened, and I knew we were on the brink of something monumental. "Now, we must act," I shouted over the roar of the cave. The time for hesitation had passed, with the symbols etched firmly in my mind. We began the ritual, the cave alive with energy. As we chanted the words we had deciphered from the drawings, I felt the weight of generations pressing down upon us, urging us to confront the darkness that had long been hidden. The shadows shifted, revealing glimpses of the past, figures caught in moments of fear and defiance. The air crackled with energy as the cave seemed to respond, the very essence of the place swirling around us, demanding our attention. In that moment, I understood that this confrontation was not just about the cave. It was a reflection of our own struggles, a chance to face the monsters that lurked within us. And as we chanted, I felt a sense of hope, a belief that even in the darkest of places, there was a possibility for light. As the last echoes of our chant dissipated into the cavernous space, an unnatural stillness enveloped us. The air felt charged, electric, and I could sense the tension mounting, as if the cave itself were holding its breath. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting into shapes that seemed to mock our efforts. I felt the weight of this darkness pressing in, a palpable force that threatened to consume us. Suddenly, a cacophony of sound erupted from the depths of the cave, a low growl that resonated through the stone, vibrating in my bones. The floor shook violently beneath us, and I stumbled, grasping for stability. Harold was at my side, his expression a mix of terror and determination. "We've awakened something," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the cave. The shadows deepened, swirling like a storm as the walls began to pulse with an otherworldly glow. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a fierce resolve. This was the moment I had been preparing for, a confrontation with the darkness that had haunted me for so long. But just as I opened my mouth to rally Harold, a figure emerged from the shadows. My heart raced as I recognized the silhouette. It was Sarah, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Mark! Harold!" she cried, rushing toward us. "I felt something was wrong. I came to find you." "Get back!" Harold shouted, but it was too late. The shadows coalesced around her, thick and suffocating, as if the cave itself were trying to pull her in. "Sarah, hold on!" I lunged forward, reaching for her, but the darkness was like a living entity, clawing at her, wrapping around her limbs. The air crackled with energy, and the growl intensified, reverberating through the stone like thunder. In that moment, everything shifted. The cave, once a mere backdrop to our conflict, transformed into a living, breathing character in our story. It reflected our fears, our struggles, and now it demanded our attention. The very essence of the place had become intertwined with our fate. "Mark!" Sarah screamed, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "I can't. Something's holding me." "Fight it," I urged, my heart pounding in my chest. The sight of her struggling against the shadows ignited a primal instinct within me. I couldn't lose her, not now, not after everything we'd faced together. As I reached toward her, the cave trembled violently, and a chilling realization struck me. The shadows were not merely a manifestation of fear, they were the remnants of those who had come before us, trapped in this place, echoing their struggles and torment. The energy surged around us, feeding off our fear and desperation, and I knew we had to confront it head on. "Harold, we need to channel the energy," I shouted, trying to drown out the chaos. "Focus on the symbols. We have to break this cycle." Harold nodded, and together we began to chant again, drawing on the energy of the cave. The shadows writhed in response, and I felt the ground beneath us shift. It was then that I realized that this moment was not just about saving Sarah. It was a chance to confront the very darkness that had plagued us all. As we chanted, a surge of power coursed through me, pushing against the shadows that threatened to consume Sarah. I could see her fighting back, her determination shining through the veil of darkness. The cave responded, the shadows contorting as if in pain, struggling against our combined will. But just when it seemed we might succeed, an unexpected event jolted the scene. A blinding light erupted from the drawings on the wall, illuminating the chamber and pushing back the shadows. In that moment of clarity, I caught a glimpse of something that made my heart stop. A figure I had never expected to see. "Mark, it's me," the figure called out, stepping into the light. It was my brother Daniel, alive, standing there before me, his expression filled with urgency and sorrow. "You have to listen to me." "Daniel?" I gasped, disbelief flooding my mind. "But how?" "There's no time," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You must break the cycle. The darkness feeds on your fears, your guilt. You can't let it consume you." My head spun with confusion and shock. How could Daniel be here? I had lost him to his own demons, and now he stood before me, a vision from the past. The sight of him filled me with a mix of hope and anguish. "Fight." Mark," he urged, his eyes locked onto mine. "You have the power to change this. You can't let the darkness win." The shadows recoiled at his words, the growls transforming into anguished cries. Sarah's struggles intensified, and I knew we had to act quickly. The moment felt surreal, a blend of past and present colliding in a way I never could have imagined. "Daniel, help us," I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "We can't do this alone." He nodded, stepping closer, and together, we channeled our energy, focusing on the light that radiated from the drawings. The shadows hissed and writhed, as if fighting against the very essence of hope we were trying to unleash. "Mark, you have to let go of your guilt," Daniel shouted, his voice steady and powerful. "Don't let it define you. Use it to break free." In that moment, everything shifted. The memories of my brother flooded my mind, the laughter, the struggles, the love we had shared. I realized that holding on to the past had only given the darkness more power. I had to let go of my guilt and embrace the light. With renewed determination, I joined Harold and Sarah in the chant, our voices rising to a crescendo. The cave trembled, and the shadows began to dissipate, retreating from the light. The growls transformed into a chorus of anguished wails, a sound that resonated through the very core of the earth. The atmosphere shifted, and I felt the weight of the cave lift as the shadows fought desperately against our collective strength. In that pivotal moment, I understood that the true power of the cave lay not in the fear it inspired, but in the light we could summon together. "Now," I urged, pouring every ounce of energy into our chant. "We can do this, together." As we united our voices, the light blazed brighter, flooding the chamber with warmth and energy. The shadows writhed in agony, and in one final surge, they shattered, dissipating into the air like smoke. The cave trembled, and the darkness that had held it captive for so long finally began to fade. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of liberation wash over me. The shadows were no longer a source of fear. They had transformed into a reminder of the power we held within ourselves. Together we had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious. As the last remnants of the shadows vanished, the cave sighed, a gentle exhalation of relief. The air felt lighter, and the once oppressive atmosphere shifted into one of hope and renewal. I turned to Sarah, her eyes shining with determination. "We did it," I breathed, disbelief and joy coursing through me. The cave, once a prison of fear, had become a sanctuary of light. And as I stood with Harold and Sarah, I knew that this was just the beginning. We had faced the darkness, but there were still stories to uncover, truths to explore. Together we would embrace the journey ahead, armed with the knowledge that the light would always prevail. As the last echoes of our chant faded into the cavern, I stood panting, the weight of what had just transpired crashing down around me. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and I felt a tremor in my fingers, my grip on the flashlight faltering. The light flickered, casting anxious shadows against the walls, remnants of the darkness that had just retreated. "Mark, are you okay?" Sarah's voice cut through the haze of adrenaline, her eyes wide with concern. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch my arm, grounding me in the present. Her touch was warm, a stark contrast to the chill that had coursed through me moments earlier. I think so," I stammered, trying to steady my breath. But the tremors in my hands betrayed me. They shook uncontrollably. The energy of the cave still pulsed around us, and I could feel the remnants of the shadows trying to claw their way back. "What just happened?" Harold, still catching his breath, leaned against the cave wall, his face pale. We confronted it. We faced the darkness, he murmured, the disbelief evident in his tone. His eyes flickered to Sarah, and I could see the weight of the moment settling over him. I turned to her, searching for reassurance, but found only a reflection of my own fear. "Are we safe now?" My voice trembled, the enormity of our actions. "Crashing over me like a wave. I don't know," she replied, her brow furrowed. "But we did something powerful. We broke the cycle." Yet even as she spoke, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the lingering shadows of fear that crept into our victory. The cave felt different now, lighter somehow, yet the remnants of the darkness still lingered, like an echo of a distant storm. I took a step forward, the ground feeling unsteady beneath me. "We need to get out of here," I said, urgency creeping into my voice. The cave, once a place of secrets, now felt like a labyrinth of uncertainty. As we made our way toward the entrance, the shadows began to shift again, but this time they felt less oppressive, more like remnants of a fading nightmare. My heart raced, and I could feel the pulse of my blood echoing in my ears. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of what we had just faced. "Mark, wait," Harold said suddenly, his voice trembling. "We should talk about what just happened. We need to process this." "Process?" I echoed, incredulous. "How? Do you even begin to process that? We just faced something alive." My words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, fueled by the adrenaline still coursing through me. Sarah stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We need to acknowledge what we did. We can't just walk away." I felt anger flare within me, a defensive reaction to the enormity of the moment. "I'm not interested in a discussion right now. I just want to get out of here," I snapped, my voice sharper than intended. The tension in the air thickened, and I caught the hurt in Sarah's eyes. "I'm not trying to lecture you," she said softly, the hurt evident in her tone. "I'm trying to understand. We need to talk about Daniel too." The mention of my brother pierced through my anger, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. "Daniel," I whispered, the name heavy with unresolved emotions. I felt the weight of his presence linger, a reminder of our shared history and the pain of loss. But even as I grappled with my feelings, the cave seemed to react, shadows swirling around us like a tempest. I could feel my pulse quicken, the fear of what lay beyond the entrance creeping back in. "Let's just go," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. "Please." As we emerged into the light of the outside world, the sun felt blinding, a stark contrast to the darkness we had just escaped. I squinted, shielding my eyes from the brilliance, and took a deep breath, the fresh air filling my lungs like a balm. Yet, as the reality of what we had faced settled in, I felt the ground shift. Beneath my feet once more, the weight of our actions pressed heavily on my chest, and I turned to face Sarah and Harold, their expressions etched with concern. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The uncertainty of our next steps loomed like a shadow, threatening to engulf us once again. "We need to tell others," Harold said, determination shining in his eyes. "We can't let this go unnoticed. The park needs to know what happened here." I shook my head, the thought of exposing our experience feeling insurmountable. What if they don't believe us? What if it leads to more trouble? My mind raced with the implications. Sarah stepped closer, her hand resting on my shoulder. We have to try, Mark. If we don't, the darkness might return. We faced it together, and we owe it to ourselves to share what we learned. Her sincerity cut through my fear, but I still felt the weight of doubt pressing down on me. I can't, I blurted out, the panic rising within me. I can't go back to that place. I can't face what we unleashed. Mark, Sarah said gently, you're not alone in this. We're in this together. Her eyes bore into mine, and I could see the strength beneath her calm facade. But even as I looked at her, the fear clawed at my insides, the shadows of doubt whispering that I was not strong enough to carry this burden. I felt the tremors return, this time fueled by the weight of my own insecurities. Let's just take a moment to breathe, Harold suggested, his voice steady. We need to regroup before we make any decisions. I nodded, grateful for a moment of respite, but the silence felt heavy, laden with unspoken fears. As we stood together, the sunlight pouring down on us, I could feel the tension in the air, a fragile thread binding us together. But just then, the tranquility was shattered by a distant rumble, a low growl echoing from the cave behind us. My heart raced, and I spun around, eyes wide with terror. What was that? I gasped, my breath hitching in my throat. The shadows seemed to swirl again, as if responding to the sound, and I felt a surge of panic grip me. We have to go now, I shouted, instinctively backing away from the cave. But Sarah stepped forward, her expression resolute. No, we can't run. We have to face whatever that is, together. In that moment, I felt the weight of her words. Anchor me, and I realized that running would not solve our problems. We had faced the darkness once, we could do it again. With a deep breath, I nodded, the resolve building within me. Together, I echoed, the word resonating within me like a promise. As we turned back toward the cave, I felt a shift within myself. Perhaps the shadows would always linger, but I knew now that I would not face them alone. With each step, I felt stronger, more determined to confront the darkness that lay ahead. The cave loomed behind us, a shadowy sentinel of the past. As I took a deep breath, the crisp air filled my lungs, grounding me in the present moment. Despite the fear that still clung to my thoughts, I felt a flicker of resolve igniting within me. This was not just about what lay within the cave. It was about the journey we had undertaken together and the lessons learned along the way. As we began to walk away from the entrance, I noticed how the sunlight illuminated everything around us, the leaves glimmering like gold, the soft rustle of the trees whispering secrets of resilience. Each step felt lighter, a testament to the burdens we had shed. It was as if the world was offering encouragement, a reminder that I was not defined by my fears, but by my ability to confront them. Mark, Sarah said, breaking the silence. She walked beside me, her eyes scanning the horizon. What do you think we should do next? I paused, the weight of her question settling in. I think we need to share our story, I replied, the words flowing with newfound conviction. The park needs to know what happened. We can't let anyone else fall into the same trap. We did. Her eyes widened with surprise, and I could see the glimmer of hope reflected in them. You're actually ready to do that? Yeah, I said, the affirmation solidifying my determination. We faced something powerful, and we can't keep it hidden. If we don't confront it, it will come back. As I spoke, I realized that this was more than just sharing a story. It was about taking responsibility, about being a guardian, not just of the land, but of the truth. As we made our way back to the ranger station, I felt a sense of purpose propelling me forward. But just as I began to embrace this newfound clarity, a new challenge arose. A group of tourists was gathered near the entrance, their laughter piercing the tranquility of the park. They were oblivious to the darkness that had recently threatened. Us, Mark, one of them called, waving enthusiastically. You have to see this. We found something amazing. I exchanged a glance with Harold, whose expression mirrored my concern. Should we tell them? He asked, uncertainty clouding his voice. I hesitated, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on my shoulders. The allure of adventure was strong, but so was the fear of what could happen if they stumbled upon the cave unprepared. I stepped forward, my heart racing. "We need to warn them," I said, the urgency in my voice surprising even me. As we approached the group, I felt the tension in my chest tighten. "Hey everyone," I called out, raising my hands to draw their attention. "Listen, I need to talk to you about the cave." "What's wrong? Did something happen?" one of them asked, concern flickering across their face. I took a deep breath, recalling the shadows that had once felt suffocating. Yes, something did happen. We encountered something powerful in there, and it's important for you to understand that not everything is what it seems. The cave can be dangerous if you're not careful. The tourists exchanged glances, some looking skeptical, others intrigued. "But we saw the drawings, they're incredible." Another chimed in, excitement brimming in her voice. I felt my heart sink as I realized the challenge ahead. "I know they're beautiful, but they hold a history that isn't just art. They're connected to something much darker, and if you're not prepared, you could be putting yourselves at risk." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the group. One man stepped forward, arms crossed defiantly. "Are you just trying to scare us? It's just a cave." "Please," I urged, my voice steady, but filled with urgency. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to protect you. We faced something in there that you can't see. It's real, and it can hurt you if you're not careful." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, the fear of being dismissed clawing at me. But I stood my ground, determined to share the truth. As the group began to discuss among themselves, I could see their attitude shifting. Some looked apprehensive, while others seemed unwilling to accept the reality of the situation. "We should go check it out, right?" one of them said, dismissing my warning with a wave of his hand. "What's the worst that could happen?" "Everything," I shouted, the frustration spilling over. "You don't understand. This isn't a game. The darkness we faced was real, and it could come back. We have to be vigilant." Sarah stepped beside me, her presence grounding. "We're not trying to ruin your trip. We just want you to be aware of what you're getting into," she added, her tone firm yet compassionate. The man who had spoken before narrowed his eyes. "You're just a park ranger. What do you know?" I felt a surge of anger, but it quickly morphed into something else. A realization that I was no longer the person who would shrink under criticism. "I know more than you think," I replied, my voice steady. "I've confronted my fears, and I'm not backing down from this one. You can choose to ignore our warning, but I won't stand by and let you walk into danger." The group fell silent, and I could see the shift in their expressions. Doubt began to creep in, and for the first time, they seemed to consider my words. "Maybe we should take a step back," one of the women said hesitantly. "What if we explored a different part of the park instead?" I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by the realization of how far I had come. I was no longer the person paralyzed by fear. I was actively choosing to protect others, to stand up for what was right. As the tourists began to disperse, I turned. To Harold and Sarah, a sense of pride swelling within me. "We did it," I murmured, disbelief coloring my tone. "We made a difference." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining. "You were incredible back there, Mark. You faced your fears head on." "I couldn't have done it without you both," I replied, gratitude swelling in my chest. "This experience has changed me. I finally understand that courage isn't about the absence of fear, it's about moving forward despite it." As we walked back to the ranger station, I felt a sense of ease settle over me. The sun shone down, illuminating the path ahead, and I realized that the shadows we had faced were no longer a source of dread, but a testament to our resilience. Each challenge had shaped me, teaching me the power of vulnerability and the importance of confronting darkness, not just in caves, but within ourselves. With every step, I felt lighter, each moment a reminder that growth is a journey, not a destination. I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that I was not defined by my past, but by the courage to face the future. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the forest floor. The crisp air was alive with anticipation, and each step I took toward the cave felt like a step into the unknown. My heart raced as I replayed the events of the past few days, our confrontation with the darkness, Daniel's unexpected appearance, and the resolve I had found within myself. Sarah and Harold walked beside me, their expressions a mix of determination and apprehension. We had decided to return to the cave not just to face whatever remnants of darkness lingered, but to ensure that it would never threaten anyone again. The weight of our mission pressed heavily on my shoulders, but I could feel the strength of my companions bolstering me. As we approached the entrance, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that gripped my stomach. The cave loomed before us, an ominous, gaping mouth that seemed to beckon us closer. I remembered the shadows that had once threatened to consume us, and the tumultuous emotions that had accompanied our journey. "Are we ready for this?" Harold asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to be," I replied, forcing conviction into my tone. "This is the only way to put an end to it." We stepped into the cave, the darkness enveloping us like a shroud. I flicked on my flashlight, illuminating the walls adorned with the ancient drawings we had once felt compelled to explore. But now, they felt like a warning, a reminder of what lay ahead. As we moved deeper into the cave, the air grew thick with tension. The low growls I had heard before echoed faintly, sending chills down my spine. Each sound reverberated off the walls, a reminder of the darkness that still resided within. "Do you feel that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, the oppressive weight of the air pressing in on us. "It's like something is waiting for us." Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I swung my flashlight toward the source, but it was just a shadow, an illusion perhaps. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Focus," I urged, trying to shake off the unease. "We need to find the heart of this place." We pressed on, each step echoing through the cavernous space. As we navigated the twists and turns, I could feel the tension rising, coiling tighter with each passing moment. The sound of dripping water punctuated the silence, a reminder of the passage of time. Then we reached a vast chamber, the heart of the cave. The walls glimmered with an eerie luminescence, casting ghostly shadows that danced around us. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, adorned with strange symbols that pulsated with a dark energy. "Here it is," I breathed, awe mingling with fear. But just as we began to approach the pedestal, the shadows in the chamber thickened, swirling like a tempest. The growls escalated, morphing into anguished cries that reverberated through the air. Panic surged within me, but I forced myself to stay grounded. "Stay together," I shouted, rallying my companions. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a figure, an embodiment of darkness that loomed before us. It was a grotesque reflection of our fears, a swirling mass of despair that seemed to draw energy from our very souls. "Mark," the figure hissed, its voice a chilling echo of my brother's, "you thought you could escape me?" My heart plummeted as realization crashed over me. It wasn't just a manifestation of fear, it was the embodiment of my guilt, the unresolved trauma of losing Daniel. The darkness was feeding off my sorrow, twisting it into something monstrous. "No," I shouted, defiance rising within me. "You're not my brother. You're just a shadow of what I've lost." The figure laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can conquer me? I am your past, your regrets. I am everything you've tried to hide." As the figure lunged forward, I felt the air thicken, and the shadows surged around us. I glanced at Sarah and Harold, their faces etched with fear but also determination. We had come too far to back down now. "Together," I shouted, and we formed a circle, our hands clasped tightly. "We can face this." We began to chant, drawing from the strength of our shared experiences. The energy in the chamber shifted, pulsating with a new intensity. The shadows writhed, but we stood firm, our resolve bolstering one another. The figure recoiled, its form flickering as if it were losing strength. "You think this will work?" it sneered, but there was a hint of uncertainty in its voice. I felt a surge of energy course through me, the memories of Daniel flooding my mind. I remembered the love we had shared, the laughter, the moments of joy that had been overshadowed by pain. "You're not the darkness. You're a part of my past, but you don't control me anymore," I shouted, my voice ringing with conviction. The shadows shrieked, twisting violently as I poured every ounce of emotion into my words. "I am not defined by my regrets. I am free to choose my path." With each declaration, the figure thinned, its form becoming less substantial. I could feel the energy shifting, the darkness retreating in the face of our combined strength. "Mark!" Sarah shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "It's working! Keep going!" Just as I felt a glimmer of hope, a surge of doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if the darkness was too powerful? But I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the strength of my companions and the love I had for my brother. "Daniel," I cried out, my voice breaking, "I miss you, but I won't let my grief consume me. I will carry your memory with me, but I refuse to let it hold me back." With that final declaration, the figure let out a deafening wail, the sound reverberating through the chamber. The shadows writhed and twisted, and in a blinding flash of light, the darkness shattered, dissipating into the air like smoke. As the echoes of the figure faded, the chamber fell silent. I stood panting, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, feeling the weight of what had just transpired. The cave felt different now, lighter, as if the darkness had been lifted. "Did we do it?" Harold asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. I looked around, my heart racing with a mix of relief and triumph. "I think we did," I replied, a smile breaking through the tension. "We faced the darkness, and it's gone." In that moment, I realized that the journey wasn't just about confronting the shadows. It was about accepting the complexities of love, loss, and resilience. Each step we had taken had led us to this moment, a moment of liberation. Suddenly, a soft glow emanated from the pedestal, illuminating the symbols etched into the stone. I approached cautiously, curiosity mingling with caution. As I reached out to touch the pedestal, the symbols began to shift and change, revealing a new message. And it was then that I understood. The true enemy had never been the darkness itself, but the fear of facing it. It had been my own regrets and guilt that I had allowed to fester, and in confronting them, I had finally reclaimed my power. The air crackled with tension as the shadowy figure loomed before us, a grotesque manifestation of my deepest fears. Its form twisted and writhed, the growls echoing ominously in the chamber. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat a reminder of the stakes at hand. "Mark, we can't let it take control," Sarah shouted, her voice slicing through the fear that threatened to suffocate me. I nodded, drawing strength from her words. "Together!" I yelled, my own voice stronger than I felt. We formed a tight circle again, hands clasped, our shared energy creating a shield against the malevolence before us. The darkness surged forward, a wave of despair that threatened to engulf us. "You think you can defeat me?" it hissed, its voice slithering into my mind. "I am your past, your regrets. You cannot escape me." But I had come too far to allow myself to be dragged back into the abyss. "You don't control me anymore," I declared, my voice steady and resolute. "I will not be defined by my fears." The shadows recoiled, and I could see the figure flickering, its form unstable. "You think your courage matters? You cannot erase me." In that moment, a surge of realization coursed through me. The true power of the darkness lay not in its ability to instill fear, but in its ability to manipulate my emotions. I had to confront it not only with courage, but with acceptance. "Sarah, Harold, hold on," I shouted as I focused on the pedestal, the glowing symbols pulsating with energy. "We need to channel everything we've learned." We began to chant again, our voices rising in unison, echoing against the stone walls. The shadows twisted violently, the anguished cries intensifying as they fought against our collective strength. Each word we spoke felt like a hammer striking the darkness, breaking it apart piece by piece. "Mark," Harold yelled, his voice strained, "it's working." But just as I felt hope surging within me, the figure lunged forward, its form erupting into a storm of darkness. I could feel its energy sucking away my resolve, and doubt began to creep back in. "Are you sure this is enough?" I thought, panic rising. "What if we can't do it?" But then I remembered Daniel, the love we had shared, the laughter that had once filled my life. "I carry you with me," I shouted into the void. "You are a part of my journey, but you do not control it." The figure faltered, its form flickering in the light of our combined energy. "You think you can erase me with words?" it sneered, but there was a hint of uncertainty now. "Yes," I shouted, the conviction in my voice growing stronger. "I will transform my pain into strength. I will not let you dictate my life." With that final declaration, the shadows screamed in agony, twisting and writhing, as if in a last-ditch effort to survive. A blinding light erupted from the pedestal, illuminating the chamber and pushing back the darkness with an intensity that felt almost tangible. "Now," I urged, pouring every ounce of emotion into our chant. "We can do this." Together, the awful shadows shrieked one last time before disintegrating into a cloud of smoke, the oppressive weight of the cave lifting in an instant. The light enveloped us, and I felt it wash over me like a cleansing tide. As the last remnants of darkness faded, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. The chamber was now silent, the glow of the symbols illuminating the space around us, like a beacon of hope. "Did we do it?" Harold's voice trembled with disbelief. "I think we did," I panted, a wave of relief washing over me. But as I looked around, the victory felt bittersweet. I had faced the darkness, yet I could still feel the echoes of loss lingering in my heart. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement. I turned to see a shadow darting along the walls, then vanish. My heart raced again. "Did you see that?" I asked, dread creeping back in. "See what?" Sarah replied, her brow furrowed. "That shadow, it felt familiar." And then, as if sensing my turmoil, the pedestal emitted a soft glow, revealing a new message etched into its surface, a reminder of my unresolved feelings. The past is not forgotten. It is a part of you. The realization struck me like lightning. The shadows may have been vanquished, but the memories of Daniel would always remain, a part of who I was, shaping my journey without controlling it. "I survived," I murmured, still processing everything that had happened. But sometimes I wonder if I truly left that place. Emerging from the cave, the sunlight felt blinding after the darkness we had just faced. I shielded my eyes, allowing the warmth to wash over me like a balm. The fresh air filled my lungs, revitalizing me, yet my heart felt heavy with the weight of what we had experienced. As we walked back toward the ranger station, the atmosphere felt different, lighter yet charged, with a new energy. The forest around us was alive with sound, a symphony of nature that echoed the triumph we had achieved. But I couldn't shake the lingering doubts. "Mark," Sarah said, breaking the silence, "you were incredible in there. I can't believe. We faced that and came out together." "Thanks," I replied, but my mind drifted back to the shadows. "But I still feel unsettled. What if it comes back?" "Then we'll be ready," Harold interjected, his voice steady. "We faced it once. We can do it again." "You've changed, Mark. You're not the same person who walked in." I nodded, but the shadows still loomed in my mind. I realized that while I had confronted the darkness, the journey of healing was far from over. The memories of Daniel would always be a part of me, and I would carry them with me, transforming pain into strength. As we neared the ranger station, I could feel a sense of purpose building within me. I was determined to share our story, to warn others about the dangers that lay hidden beneath the surface. I would not allow my experience to fade into obscurity. Once inside, I gathered the team, sharing the details of our encounter with the shadows. The responses were a mix of disbelief and concern, but I pushed through, emphasizing the importance of awareness and vigilance. The park would be different now, more focused on the stories that shaped its landscape. I envisioned educational programs, workshops, and community events that would encourage others to face their fears, to confront their own shadows. Weeks passed, and the impact of our experience rippled through the community. People began to share their own stories of struggle and resilience, and I found myself at the center of a movement dedicated to healing and growth. I realized that facing the darkness had not only freed me, but had also created a space for others to embrace their own journeys. Together, we would shine a light into the shadows, transforming fear into understanding. Months later, as I stood at the edge of the forest, I reflected on how far I had come. The park thrived, filled with laughter and life, yet I still felt a whisper of the past. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I could almost hear Daniel's voice, reminding me that it was okay to remember and to carry on. If this story resonated with you, I encourage you to reflect on your own journeys through darkness and light. Share your thoughts and experiences with others. You never know who might need to hear your story. And if you're intrigued by this journey, click to explore the next story or video that appears on your screen. Each tale offers a new perspective, inviting you to discover the resilience within yourself.